from UK, Foreign and Commonwealth Office. She has received the award for Best Faculty in Management from Bombay Management Association, as well as Narsi Monji Institute of Management Studies. So this is all about, in fact, if I start giving the introduction, I think it will go too long. Yeah. So with this, I will request our ISTD Mumbai chapter chairman, Mr. Panikar, to speak few words about the ISTD Mumbai chapter and its work before we start with the lecture of Dr. Anita Madhok. So over to you, Mr. Panikar.
Hi, good evening to all of you all. It's a pleasure to see so many participants on this wonderful evening and also to get some gyan from Dr. Anita on how to become coaches. But before I say anything, let me also welcome Dr. Kurian Daniel, our National Vice President to this event. And before I say a few words, let me just ask him to say a few words before I would take the mic from him. Mr. Kurian?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Panikar. It is a proud privilege to be with you all and also get a gyan, as you said, from Dr. Madhok. I couldn't get much chances to listen to her. So I thought, even though I will get only half an hour because I have to attend that tribute meeting of our Parimal Gandhi. So I'll be there up to 6:30 with you. So the regular meetings and learning series conducted by our Bombay chapter is a blessing to all because it is a real chance of learning. And it is a commitment from Mr. Panikar and his team to encourage all others to be in this L&D fraternity. I wish all the best to Dr. Anita Madhok and Mumbai chapter for future endeavors. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kurian. So once again, a warm welcome to all of you all. ISTD, for those of you who are new to ISTD, is a 50-year-old organization. Last year, we just celebrated our Golden Jubilee. It is technically the association for L&D professional, but we also have people from all walks of life, from businesses, from HR, and other fields. The idea is to promote learning and development, to create capacity building in the training field, and to help the industry to build their talent and develop the management bandwidth in the organization. We are organized around more than 38 chapters with a national office headed by the national president, and the national vice president is here with us. The chapters are headed by the chapter chairman, and there are secretaries, treasurer, all of us who manage the affairs. On a regular basis, we conduct such evening event. The idea being that we want to upgrade the latent talent and the skills of the training fraternity. I don't want to say much except to add that Dr. Anita Madhok is also been selected to write the revised module of the diploma program. Diploma program is one of the flagship program of ISTD. It's an 18 months distant learning program, and she has written the entire chapter on the first part of the semester one. And it's a pleasure for us in Mumbai chapter that somebody from Mumbai has been honored to do that. And she's also honored to be on the lecturer's post for the All India semester one diploma program that has been running. She's among the 4 who is going to take the classes of the diploma semester one. So it's a pleasure to have Anita taking this session with us. And I don't want to take much time. Over to you, Anita.
Thank you, everybody. Out of the 50 years of ISTD's existence, I must confess, for 40 years, I think in May or June, it will be 40 years since I've been initially a member and then after that a life member of ISTD. So I can definitely say I'm probably one of the long-standing members here. And although my active association been on off, but I have really seen this institution grow, and the number of members and the spread and the reach of ISTD today is amazing. And I do wish well for this institute in the future. So before I begin, I'd also like to share a little bit about my story of how I became from a trainer to a coach. I think that will also benefit everybody. You see, it all began when I was a student of psychology in Lady Shri Ram College in Delhi University. My interest was always with people and with human beings, and to have relationships with human beings that would cater to their well-being and to their, emotional wellness and their psychological wellness and their personal learning and their personal growth. So over the years, I moved into various different kinds of course, you've seen my biodata and my positions, but my interests were sometimes in training to start with, as a training manager in my job situation, then as an OD manager in another job situation. And then when I came into academics, it was more of teaching and training, because when I was a teacher for 14 years, we would also do a lot of training for organizations. And the domain was always behavioral. So even in my teaching, I was teaching organizational behavior. And I looked at every class of mine as a training session and never as a teacher, trainer, teaching kind of session. So a lot of experience went into training in behavioral skills. A lot of years of my life, I was training. And then I chanced upon a methodology of process work when I became a member and a fellow member of the Indian Society for Individual and Social Development as a lab facilitator. And I would do a lot of personal growth labs for my students. And I realized that the process methodology of being a facilitator is far more fulfilling for me, where I don't have to be the only person holding gyan as you expected, but I'm also a person who facilitates for other people. And so I was for many years doing both things. I was training and facilitating. And a lot of my training started becoming and looking more like facilitating rather than training. Because in behavioral sciences, there's only so much you can tell people, do's and don'ts. Because already people have got so many do's and don'ts in their heads, and that's the source of big trouble for them. And then you give them one more set of do's and don'ts, and that doesn't seem to work, So we would facilitate them to learn for themselves, even in training sessions. So when I started my own consulting practice about 13 years ago, my aim was continue working in behavioral stream, working with people, and initially as a counselor for many people. And then the word coach started coming in, and I got a lot of assignments from clients which said, okay, forget the training format where one person and big audience. We want to do one-to-one coaching sessions with our senior managers, or even sometimes young people and new millennial kind of population. So I started calling myself a coach, and because I was doing one-to-one sessions, I was a trainer and a coach. So the one-to-one sessions, I call them coaching sessions, which were actually coming more from my behavioral sciences and psychology domain, I realized now I was doing more of counseling, at a lot of counseling kind of inputs, managing people's emotions and feelings and building perspectives and giving advice and, helping settle their sense of well-being. And 1 year, one of my clients decided to, discontinue their leadership development program. And this was about 30% of my work, This year we are not doing our LDP, and so I said, let me do some certification in coaching instead. Let me go for a training. And that's when my journey was complete, or reached another milestone. I will not say complete, because journeys are never complete. I reached another milestone and I became a professional coach, a professionally trained coach. And that from then on, my coaching has taken on very professional terms, and I became member of International Coach Federation, and I've got a PCC level coach certification. There are many PCCs, not the only one, but it's a journey. So this has been my journey to becoming a coach where I am today. And I'd like to, when I spoke with Mr. Panikkar, he said, Anita, I want you to share how do trainers, every trainer wants to also now get into coaching because there's a huge
If you don't mind,
opportunity.
Anita, can you come closer because there's a voice fluctuation of yours.
Okay. So I hope it's better now. So every trainer wants to become a coach or wants to look at coaching as a prospective market because it's a huge burgeoning market today. And so today's topic was merely to explore this journey that trainers can take to become coaches, and many are already doing it and many are already juggling the two. But this is going to just take you through what it takes for a trainer to become a coach in many ways. So here's where I start sharing my presentation. So when a trainer wants to become a coach, and there are lots of people out there who are in this position. Let me say I've been a trainer longer than I've been a coach. More than half my life, professional life has been training, and the last few years has been in coaching. So I am not going to say that being a trainer is bad or wrong or not wanted or not valid anymore, because to me, training has huge benefits. Today, if someone asked me to do a training program, which I rarely get invited to, I would still continue to do that. So training and its benefits. Everybody in the audience knows what is training. So I'm not going to spend more than 2 minutes on it. Just enough that the root of the word training comes from a mindset, and in our minds, how this word concept of training is held is that there is one person here and there's an audience over there. And this trainer is also, if you see, when he takes a seat, he's also seated a little higher so the audience can see him. And then he's making a talk or a presentation, and mostly he's standing and doing whatever he does. And he's communicating knowledge, he's communicating skills, he's communicating a lot of things. And so that's the way the training concept is held in our minds and in our hearts. So the root of the word comes, it's about 4 centuries old, this word training, and it comes from a discipline and instruction to develop. So there's a discipline, there's a structure, there's a process, and there's an instruction. You give a set of do's and don'ts and steps to success and milestones, and this is how you do it, and this is, you demonstrate how it's done. And so that's the word training, and that's the whole mindset of training. And there's a definition of training as well. Huge benefits of training.
We are again losing you.
Okay, I don't know if it is my internet connection. Usually isn't a trouble. Is it my sound or is it the internet connectivity?
Your sound,
Anita,
your sound is going back.
Actually, I can hear you very clearly, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Yes, so can I.
Check yours.
You are clear, ma'am. You are very audible.
Yeah, I think Mr. Panikkar, perhaps it's your internet connection that's receiving.
I'm looking at the feedback which is coming, and that's why I'm telling you.
Okay. Okay, sometimes people have connection problems. There's never any session where there is no connection problem. So we'll just try and tide over that. Sometimes it's mine, sometimes it's that end, we don't know, but usually I keep strong internet connectivity because I do a lot of my sessions online. So training has huge benefits. I'm not denying that, and still continues to have and continues to be the big chunk of any organization's learning and development budget. Any organization you go to, the big chunk is still on training, and because it results in improved skills, it increases employee confidence, it increases satisfaction and morale in organizations, reduces work wastages, creates a talent pipeline for the future, addresses organizational weaknesses, so many benefits. And if you want, I can still talk and more about this, but we all know we are all trainers first. Many of us are trainers first. So what is professional coaching? Now here is, I want to do a little bit of a debrief, which means that, in India particularly, because we are born in this culture, when we are little young in school also, we say so-and-so is going for a coaching class, or so-and-so is going for a, which means that there's some deficiency in him that is going to be corrected. or which perhaps means that he's learned a lot in his school and this coaching teacher is going to top it up with that. Or which means that the teacher didn't do a very good job, so we're sending him for coaching so he comes up to the mark. So we have grown up and we are deeply encultured in a definition of coaching, which we need to throw away when we are now looking at professional coaching. That's why I use the word professional coaching. We need to throw away that and we need to debrief that. We need to just say that's not our definition of coaching. Our definition of coaching is something completely different. And what is our definition of professional coaching? I'm going to give you a Venn diagram, which will give you some kind of a idea what coaching is not, and also what coaching is, and what's the difference between coaching, mentoring, and training. So a trainer provides information. I think today's session is a training session because I'm providing information. Asks direct questions and says, okay, what do you think about this? And what is your opinion on this? And did you learn this properly? And at the end of it, there may be a quiz also at the end of the training session. He delivers knowledge. A trainer seeks specific answers, often highly structured. You have an instruction design matrix. Nowadays, I'm doing a lot of ID metrics for many of my sessions where every part of that is structured and you can tell because everything is proper session plan. And is based on past learning. Some research that has been done somewhere outside India, perhaps sometimes inside India, some experience, some best practice, some case study. Somebody has learned something in the past and they want to communicate that to you. Then there is a mentor. A mentor is someone generally from the same field as you are. And so if you are an IT expert and you are specialized in website development, then a mentor is someone who spent more time than you in that area and in that domain. And you are much younger perhaps or much less experienced. And this mentor gives you a lot of guidance as to whether your thinking is right or not right, whether your skills are in the right direction, whether your decision-making is in the right way. So the mentor answers direct questions. And if he doesn't have the answers, he provides information sources and says, hey, I don't know the answer, but this is where you talk to so-and-so, so-and-so, you might get the answer from there. A mentor seeks alternate answers and is very structured. You schedule time, etc., and is based on past experience, something that happened, his experience of so many websites he's developed. He knows what works and he knows what doesn't work, and that's what he brings on the table. A coach does none of all this. A coach is quite an antithesis to being a trainer and quite the opposite of being a mentor. A coach is someone who asks open-ended questions and says, what do you think should be done here? How would you do it? Would you like to explore the answer to this? Or is this the direction you really want? So these are the kind of questions we will ask, we call them high mileage questions, or we call them powerful questions, which enable self-discovery, which compel you, okay, I never thought of that myself. Now let me think of the answer to that question. And it pushes you into a domain you've not gone before in your own head. Dispels false feelings and beliefs. So he'll mirror to you, a coach, he or she will mirror to you your own self-limiting beliefs that you sometimes get caught in, some assumptions that you're sitting on that you haven't verified, some whims and fancies that prevent you from seeing a bigger picture, or something that you're caught up in that you need to break through from. So a coach will dispel such kind of false feelings and beliefs and bring you to face with your own reality within you. Coaching can be applied to any situation. And coaching is always future focused. We never ask the question, where did it all begin? And what happened when you were a young child? And for me as a psychologist, I found that the most difficult, because I'm used to dealing with everything that's happening today as a result of some childhood trauma. But this was the most difficult, to say, okay, what do we do about it in the future? How do we go about resolving this? What would you want to take forward from here? And what's a positive vision for yourself? How do you see a solution to this? So we ask those kind of questions, which are only looking forward, never looking back. One more framework is, this was my journey too, from being a counselor to a coach. And so as a trainer, sometimes we get into an advisory situation where we focus on problems in the past, we work towards emotional well-being, we give advice and we say, hey, why don't you take a cup of green tea and go to sleep and meditate, and so maybe things will be better. Ask the question, why should you change? What is it that's compelling you? And the counselor has all the answers, gives the diagnosis and the treatment. Whereas a coach only looks in the future, looks for solutions. Let's plan something better from here onwards. Never gives advice unless you really, really compel them, and then they will say, okay, I'm pulling down a yellow curtain, then I'll give you advice. I'm not a coach, but this is, my advice as a human being, but not in my coaching capacity. But that's very, very rare. And the client or the coachee, we call the coachee the client, has all the answers, and we assist them to find their own solutions. There's Milton Erickson, someone I believe in because I'm trained by the Erickson School of Coaching, but his 5 principles represent very fundamental beliefs of what a coach ought to carry as his fundamental. It's like a theory X and Y or McGregor when you go to management, but this is Milton Erickson tells you the fundamental beliefs of a coach. And it's a huge challenge to really believe in this and act on that belief, that all people are okay. Everyone, everywhere is okay, wherever they are. And they have real resources. Everyone has their own innate intelligence. They have their own context. I cannot think for them. I cannot feel for them. I cannot solve their problems for them. I cannot eat for them. I cannot sleep for them. They have their own resources. They have to do what they have to do. Every person has a positive intention, and everything is for the greater good. Someone said to me in the morning, I said, what is this pandemic? Why did it have to happen? It's really horrible. Why did nature have it this way? Why did God have it this way? I don't know why, but my faith and belief is probably for a greater good. Somewhere, some good is going to come out of this. And those who are fighting it and surviving it are going to benefit. Those who are fighting it and are not fighting it and not getting it, they're also going to benefit from it. Everybody is going to benefit. Everything that happens is for the greater good. People do their best. People do their best. One of the things I say is that everyone is going through challenges of their own. Nobody's life and journey is perfect. Everybody has their own challenges. Everybody has their own baggage which they carry, and they just do the best that they can with it. And the other day we were having a group coaching session, and it was all women in the coaching session, and everyone's working from home. And one of the girls, she didn't switch on her video, and there were 5 of us. And I said, look, if there's one person without her video on, then, it's not right. I want to connect with you. I can't connect with you face to face. Let's put your video on. So she says, okay, ma'am, if you insist, I'll put my video on. And then she put her video on, and she was sitting with a 2-year-old child and, feeding the baby, and I said, I'm so amazed with a 2-year-old. I can understand the challenges you're going through at home, and I can understand your child is hungry and you have this session. I can fully understand. I'm so grateful that you just showed up today. It's a big challenge for you just to show up and be present for the session today. So instead of passing a judgment, which will be a negative judgment for her. So people do their best. That is the faith, that each one has their challenges and each one is living with their own lives and the problems that it comes, and each one is doing their best. And last, change is inevitable. If someone ever says nobody will change, so it's not going to change, that's not possible, because you never enter the same river twice. You may be sitting in the same space, entering the same river, but it's not the same river. The river has moved on. You never enter the same river twice. So these are fundamental principles. What happens in a coaching session? Again, this is from Erickson Coaching, where I was groomed, and this is a typical thing that happens in a coaching session. We call this a coaching arrow. And initially we establish rapport, and there's certain skills and techniques over here. And then we set a contract as to what we're going to do in the session, and what does the client want to have the best possible outcome in the session. And then we look at some frames for the outcomes, that we are hoping to have. We create an experience. These are called the neurological levels, but I can explain this. I can spend one lecture only on this one. We try and move them up the neurological levels, if any sense. And we look at some kind of an action outcomes for the person. And at the end of it, we close the session by what value did we actually deliver, and then we celebrate. So this is typically one-to-one session. What actually transpires, very typical, I mean, very stereotyped. Generally, 70-80% of the time we don't get to this degree of structure, because what you have to live in the moment and let the moment evolve. And sometimes this is not what the moment does. This is something I made for another friend of mine when I was doing a webinar. I think he's here today, Kevin Dias. I made it for him earlier. And this is something about, this tree is like the human being, and this is a tree of leadership coaching. And there's a world out there, it's an environment out there, which is organizations, competition, peer pressure. And then the leaves of the tree are how you see people and, the skills, competencies, performance, rewards, leadership styles. And then you look at the trunk of the tree, which strengthens the tree. What strengthens your competencies is your emotional intelligence, spiritual practice, meditation, prayer, social capital, your networking, exercise, physical health. These are all things that make your leadership stronger. And then the roots of your leadership come from your self-awareness, identity, self-belief, purpose, values. So so in a coaching conversation, we work mostly we begin here, but we try and bring the person this level, because that's where we believe the transformation really lies. And coaching achieves transformation. Believe me, it does. My faith is it does, and I've seen it, I've experienced it. It makes a change in people's lives, and the lives are never the same. The difference is the training works from inside out. So I can train on emotional intelligence. I can tell them everything that Daniel Goleman tells you. I can give them I can give them set of do's and don'ts, and I can say how to be self-aware, how not to. I can do training on how to build your network. I can do training on competencies, but the training is from outside in. And the coaching in all these areas is from inside out. That's the difference. And it's all the difference, and it makes the world of a difference. I can add more and more to this slide. Actually, this is still work in progress, this particular slide. Coaching begins with developing trust and intimacy. That's the most important. For a coachee to be able to trust himself in your presence, and for you to trust the coachee. And I've had many lessons in building that trust over the years. Coaching works with deep and active listening. There are 3 or 4 levels of listening that we do. And we still remain present in that listening. And we kind of bracket ourselves out and we listen to what the other person has. And it's not just the words the person is saying. And this is the most difficult part sometimes, for most people it's the most challenging part. And it's actually, trying to empathize with the person and trying to look at the journey that the person is experiencing and trying to work with him rather than with her, with him or her rather than with what you think you should work with. Coaching works with the power of asking rather than telling. And I can only say this, I don't know how to demonstrate this, but it works with the power of asking. There are occasions when you should not coach, and I'm very clear that I will not do this kind of coaching. I'm very clear. When coaching is seen as corrective, believe me, one client early on in my life as a coach sent me few people, and later on I found, that the idea was that, this person should go for coaching. If he doesn't correct himself, we should sack him. And that was that when that got revealed to me, I was, I didn't go back to that particular client. Sometimes the coachee is reluctant, and sometimes because he has been nominated by the company and he's not volunteered. So he comes and he says, okay, my company has sent me for coaching. I don't think I need coaching. So someone now please coach me and tell me how I can be different. And he's sabotaging subliminally sabotaging everything you're saying. When the coachee is emotionally turbulent and needs a therapist instead of a coach. This is very clear. One of the ethical guidelines of International Coach Federation is that if you're not qualified as a therapist, please do not take on emotional issues and those kind of things, because that's not what coaching is about. And it's an ethical guideline we follow. When it's more about learning a specific technical knowledge and the client and the coachee is already motivated about learning it, I know what I have to do and I'm motivated to do it, so there's no more value addition the coach can offer. When as a coach, it is not in your intrinsic nature to listen and ask questions and like to speak more and tell. So I bumped into a CEO, a couple of months ago, and he's a retired CEO, a very well-known person, and he told me, Anita, you're also a coach, and my wife is also a coach, and I tried my hand at coaching, but I can't do it. So I said, does it mean that you prefer to speak and tell rather than listen? He said, how did you get it? I said, that's a fact, because in coaching, you have to listen rather than speak and tell. So if it's not in your intrinsic nature, it's better you don't coach. When you can't switch off your mobile phone and your doorbell and other distractions for 1 hour and give undivided attention, believe me, coaching cannot be multitasked. You cannot multitask through a coaching session. You have to switch it off, everything, and isolate yourself in a room. There could be an earthquake. There could be a disaster happening outside, but you have to. When there's an atmosphere of mistrust and lack of openness in the coachee as well as in the organization. The organization is one that is very, feudalistic, paternalistic, hierarchical, or very, mistrusting kind of an organization, very process-bound, very bureaucratic, very, colloquial. So then in such cases, it's better not to coach, because people will not, it will come as, they will not be, there's no coaching culture there. Let's say there's no coaching culture. And when as a coach, I'm a hierarchical person. I like to speak top down and I like to speak bottom up, and I can't equalize with people across hierarchy. You have to meet people where they are. You can't meet people as, gods if they're above you, and, touch their feet and then coach them. And you can't talk down at them if they are less than you. And you have to meet people, there's an equalization. So that's, I will try and, close this in the next 10-15 minutes so that we can get more with questions and answers. Sometimes training fits better than coaching. And like I said, organizations spend 90% of their budget today even on training. And then only where some organizations of coaching are spending only 5 or 10% of their budget on coaching. And specific technical skills need to be built. There was a PricewaterhouseCoopers study, PwC study in 2019. There was a report which spoke of a coaching market, a leadership coaching market in organizational sector of $15 billion. The market is $15 billion. And they said it's going to reach $20 billion by the year 2022, which is next year. I believe it's going to be bigger than 20 billion. At least the rate of growth is going to be bigger, because during the pandemic, the demand for coaching has just boomed. It's just boomed hugely. And so the global market is going to be more than $20 billion. So there is a case for a lot of trainers who want to become coaches, that there is an opportunity out there, and there is a market out there, and there is a need out there, and there is a global need and a social need that coaching fulfills. And particularly when you're looking at the younger generation, the millennials, the Gen Zs, and now the Alpha Gens, a coaching approach is much superior and much more impactful and much more effective as compared to a telling and selling approach. So, but there are still many occasions when training fits better than coaching today. Specific technical skills sometimes need to be built. So you've got a digitization program going out, and you need to train people on the new platforms that you're using. And so that's a very clear case for training to be put in. Sometimes there are group learning needs. By and large, I've got lots of people here who need training in presentation skills, and they don't have good presentation skills. So that's very clearly a case for training. In training, we look at IDPs, or individual development plans, and that's the beginning point for our coaching, or some 360-degree feedback, or some psychometric profiling. So in coaching, the unit of change is the individual, but when it's a group, then it is group learning needs, and training will fit better. Sometimes there are culture building activities, vision statements, value statements, and some excellence journeys that we are on, or some town halls that we have, an open house cultures to be built, and OD interventions, some digitization journeys, like I said, some change management, we're having a merger and an acquisition, or our company is being acquired by somebody, or these kind of scenarios. Training will do a better job, because it can deliver messages, and it can deliver knowledge, and it can facilitate change in larger ways, in a more concerted manner. And I just feel like, I had one coaching candidate, and she was, she had a dream of becoming a professional photographer. And we kept coaching her, and my organization is paying my bill to coach her. And she ultimately decided on her dream, wanting to be a photographer, and she quit the organization and moved on, and it happened in the coaching session. So I just felt very, strange that the company is paying my bill, but they've lost a person, and it's all intertwined. So that is sometimes, that happens, and it happened once only in my case. Mostly my coaching helps people integrate themselves in organizations much better. So this is when training fits better, and you will get 90% training. How to become a professional coach, for those who are not initiated yet in the audience. First of all, do your research and understand what it takes, and if it is for you or not. Are you, going to meet the criteria of being a coach? Or does it win you to be a coach? Is it in you to be someone who listens? Is it in you to be someone who, can empathize and hold compassion for your coachees? So do your research, understand if it's in it for you, or if you want to take the plunge or not. Then you need to get coach training from an accredited coach training provider. And there's a list of these in the ICF website, International Coach Federation website, which you can join the ICF. It's a small fee that you pay for an annual membership. Even if you're not trained, you just want to just be a member and listen into all the conversations there, and attend webinars, and know what coaching is about. Maybe it's a good idea to take a 1-year membership before you actually decide to get coach training, just to know whether it's in it for you, whether you're in it, whether you're right for it or not. So you can become a member. There's a Mumbai chapter also, for those who are from Mumbai. There's a Mumbai chapter also. Although I would say join the global ICF, it's better to interact at that level. Once you've got your coach training, then you can get certification and credentials. You can see over here, these are my credentials here as a PCC. My next slide is a little bit about the certification. And be prepared for continuing professional accreditation. The essence of any certification is it's a qualification. It's not a qualification, it's a certification. A qualification, like once you got your PhD, you're a PhD for life. Once you got your master's and MBA, you're an MBA for life. But when you get a certification, it's usually valid for 3 years. It's usually valid for 3 years. And sometimes it's 5 years in some cases, but mostly it's valid for 3 years. And you have to, continually engage in the CPE, continual professional education. You have to continue to attend webinars that update your knowledge. You have to continue to engage with coaching circles that update your skills. And you have to continue to, so you have to collect a certain amount of continuing coach education units, and then only you get recertified at the end of 3 years. So it's very important. A certification is different from a qualification.
Internet.
I will request Mr. Manohar Bhagwat to kindly mute himself. Your sound is coming through.
Okay, ma'am.
ICF core competencies. These are some of the competencies of a coach, and these are as defined by the International Coach Federation. So you can see that there is some ethical guidelines and something called a coaching agreement, which is the beginning of a coaching contract with a coachee. It's a psychological contract. When I did psychology, we call it psychological contract, that we agree to work with each other, and I agree to work with you, you agree to work with me, kind of thing. Then how do you create the relationship with, and that's a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. With trust and intimacy, you have to trust me, I trust you, and the intimacy and the sharing and the caring and all that happens. And there's something called coaching presence, and this is I don't know if I can put words to this, but it's a psychological position that the coach takes and provides that unconditional space to the coachee for engaging in his or her own exploration and his or her own transformation. So that is part of the co-creation. And this communicating effectively. It's more about authenticity. It's more about listening. It's more about the powerful questions that I ask. When I listen to the person, in that moment, a question comes up and you ask that question, and that makes all the difference. And then there's also about direct and authentic communication. There's no beating around the bush. It's just clear and direct. So if you're able to have that kind of a direct conversation, then coaching competencies is good for you. How do you facilitate results and learning in your coachee? That is by creating awareness. How do you create awareness? Ask the right questions and awareness happens. How do you enable the coachee to design actions? What kind of planning, goal setting happens in the sessions? And then what is the accountability of a coachee to his or her own actions? How do you build that accountability? And there are ways to do that. So these are the International Coach Federation, and I do believe International Coach Federation is the only one apex body, and I am glad for that. If there were more than one, is like having, the more than one FIFA and UEFA, like, kind of splinter groups, because then everyone is doing their own thing and then there's no coherence. So I'm glad there is International Coach Federation, that's the apex body. And it's well governed and it's well moderated out there. There are 3 levels of coach certification. Each one of them has a requirement for a certain number of hours of coach training, that you have to have so many training hours and only by accredited training providers, and a number of hours of actual coaching that you have done with actual recordings of sessions that you have conducted. So each one has their own requirements. So the beginning entry level is an ACC, for which you need 100 hours of coaching. Plus there's a knowledge test mostly, and there's an ethics test as well you do. Then at the PCC level, you need, I think, 800 hours of coaching. And then at the MCC level, you need 2,500 hours of coaching experience, and all the other requirements. So it's a huge leap from one to the other. It doesn't happen very quickly. And that's good. So before I close, for each one of the trainers in the audience, or anybody who wants to become a coach, there's a huge mindset shift that is needed. And it all begins with your intention. What is your intention? What is it? Why do you want to become a coach? What is it for you? What is your intention in becoming a coach? I had somebody, I shot a little survey I'd asked questions as to why do you want to become a coach? And someone said, I want to earn the respect and admiration of people. And that's not the right intention, I'm sorry. So you have to discover the right intention from your side. If you're a centrality addict, I love to be the center of attraction. I love to be in the limelight. I love to have all the eyes on me as a trainer. That's the biggest kick. That's the biggest kick we ever get, is that we love the centrality of training. And everybody wants to have all the likes on Instagram, and everyone wants to have, that gives you dopamine shots. If you're a centrality addict, then you're not for coaching. You need to shift that mindset to saying that I'm not the only person. The central person is the coachee. It's all about you. It's not about me. It's about letting go of judgmentality. I know it's not a word in the language, but it's that judgment that you have on people. That so and so, there's a value loading. This is good about him, this is not good about him. This is good and this is not good. This is right, this is wrong. So that judgmental orientation is something that has to go, because things are as they are. Situation is as it is. It's not right, it's not wrong. The situation is as it is. And you have to go with that. So letting go of that judgmental part of you actually is a big relief. It's a big relief. And once you become a coach, it's very difficult to go back to being a trainer, frankly. It's very difficult, because then you have to go there and you have to tell people, if you have a control orientation, you want to, have a say in everything that other people do all the time. You micromanage people. You tell them to do this and step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. If you have a micromanagement control orientation, then that has to go also. The mindset has to change. Listening requires a quiet mind. So if you yourself are emotionally very turbulent, illogical, irrational, and emotionally unable to see sense, then how will you ever be able to listen to someone else? How will you quieten your own chatter? A lot of coaches meditate. A lot of coaches do physical exercises and yoga. And a lot of coaches go into retreats sometimes, because you have to quieten your mind. If your mind is turbulent and you are angry, you're insecure, how can you ever coach? If you yourself are insecure. And if you're a blabbermouth and you're unable to maintain client confidentiality and unable to, you want to talk about your client every time and you want to, you blabbermouth, then that's not for you, because client confidentiality is the fundamental building block of any trust issue or any intimacy or any kind of coaching conversation. That what is happening in a coaching conversation stays in a coaching conversation. And many times companies will ask you for a midterm review. You've got a coaching program going and a midterm review, then you can only talk in very general terms. You can't specifically reveal what is happening in a coaching session. And you have to let go of the need to create dependencies. For example, in my case, I offer a coaching package of 5 plus perhaps 1, sometimes a 6th session is needed, but mostly 5 coaching sessions once a month for 5 to 6 months. And that's the package I believe works for me, that enables people to come back and explore and imagine. And at the end of 5 sessions, I believe the person's got enough insights, enough experimentation, enough change in their behavior, and then it's able to be self-sustaining. If there is a need for the coachee to keep coming back to you for more, then something is wrong. You're not doing your job. You have to close after a certain number of sessions, and that is pre-decided. That after 5 sessions or after 5 months or after 6 months, we are going to close. And if you have not been able to achieve anything in that period, then too bad. That's also, it's not, that means that you're not likely to achieve anything in the next 6 sessions also. So creating dependencies, the coachee has to keep coming back to you, is if you have that need, that I need to have my regular income every month on month and week on week, the coach is coming back to me, then coaching is definitely not for you. You have to let go of that and make the shift. And the fundamental shift is from me to you. So I found a very nice visual animation here where all that exists in my brain is you, not me, when I'm in a coaching session. And that's what coaching is about. So we'll take questions now. I have a couple of more slides, but I would like to take questions, and if required, we can go back to those. I have a slides on some coaching case studies of how I've helped organizations with their coaching, through coaching in their OD efforts.
Ma'am, I have a
Rakesh has raised a hand. Rakesh, ask the question first, please.
People, everyone, please raise your hand so that we know that who has the question.
Rakesh.
Anita ma'am, there are a few questions in the chat too. Would you want me to first take that up, or would you want to take the raised questions?
So I can see one, Meeta Dixit has asked a question, can a coach be a facilitator too? And I do believe that the difference between, I didn't put one slide on that, but I was toying with this myself. And the difference between a coach and a facilitator, and you know, I think 2 months ago, there was a program on facilitation skills in ISTD Mumbai only, and I attended that session. The difference is that the coach has empathy and compassion, whereas the facilitator is very neutral. The coach exists with love, compassion, and empathy. Facilitator is very neutral, his feelings won't come into it. And a facilitator will always deflect the answers. A facilitator may not ask questions which are too powerful. Will any question addressed to him, he will say, okay, you answer it yourself. Whereas a coach is far more active in the sense they will ask questions that will push you in a direction which you've never been before. And there's a lot of empathy and compassion in coach as compared to facilitators. So that's one answer. And
ma'am, there's one more question.
Yeah.
There's one more question. What is accountability of a coach towards a coachee?
The accountability of a coach towards the coachee is to hold unconditional space. That's what I'm accountable to you for. And my accountability is to keep asking you the questions that will deliver to you what you want out of the session. So it begins with the coaching contract. But yeah, so when we looked at the ICF competencies on accountability, it meant how do I create accountability in the coachee for his own actions? So many times a coachee will come and will say, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do the other thing. And then next session comes, I couldn't pay any attention to that. And then, I'm not there to hold you accountable to what you committed yourself to. You have to be honoring your own commitment to your own self. So how do I create that atmosphere or that, there are techniques that we do to anchor the person to be accountable to himself. We sometimes assign an accountability partner, sometimes we, different ways we do.
I have a question. Can I ask Jaideep?
Jaideep, just a minute. Yeah. Jaideep, you're not clear. Can you be a little more clear? And I request everyone, just a minute, that please mute yourself because there are some noises which is coming. It might, disturb others to listen to. So please self-mute yourself. Yes, Jaideep, you can go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I'm in a hospital situation. I'm a PG student and I'm recovering from COVID. I was fortunate to attend this session. So, ma'am, made my day because I remember in one of the session I asked ma'am about facilitation skills. So, my question is very brief. In one of the slide, ma'am mentioned that that coaching versus training requirement. In the globally, we have a lot of need of trainers versus coaches. That number was for trainers that I just wanted to know. So something you mentioned that the training need, overall need, group need is more than individual need.
So first of all, Jaideep, I'm really wishing you good luck and get well soon and speedy recovery to you. I can see you with your mask and all there. So I'm really touched that you attended today's session. I do believe that there are times when coaching does not fit. And if I'm an organization HR manager, if I'm a CHRO in a company, I say, no, I have group needs, I have large needs. So coaching doesn't fit. And that's why training actually fits better as an intervention. So that was the reason why that slide came up.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Got it. Thanks a lot.
Before I take Dhananjay Gaur's question, there is one more question here sent by Flossie D'Souza. She says that how to identify who needs coaching.
Everybody needs coaching. You can't tell us a problem employee and because he's a problem employee, he needs coaching, because that's the wrong way to go about it. So a coaching is a part of a larger intervention, you know, that you're designing an OD intervention or something. If you like, I can share 2-3 case studies are there, but there's not enough time. If there is time, I can share how coaching has impacted. And so coaching is a part of a larger intervention. So sometimes entire teams are coached. So there are times I've taken a CXO and the entire set of direct reports under one CXO and then the full intervention, we call it a team Tarang, which is coaching based intervention. And sometimes the entire, and sometimes it is a part of a leadership development program. One of my clients for many years, they have a women's leadership program. And every year they put the women through, you know, certain coaching inputs. So I've been associated with them for many years. So there is no criteria for coaching, who's coachable and who's not coachable. Sorry, there's no clear answer there. Everybody can benefit with coaching. Okay,
yes. Dhananjay Gaur, please ask your question. You can unmute yourself.
Thanks, Ms. Anita. My question is that, can you highlight that what are the steps that one can follow in this entire coaching process as a coach? Like this, I will do in first meeting, second meeting, subsequently, and this should be my last step. Any process that you can highlight that a coach should follow to coach a coaching, please.
So I did one time, you know, write one full thing on 5 coaching session design document, you know. And then I discovered, you know, it's my agenda, which I want to put on the coaching. It's not possible. That's not the right approach. You can't have an agenda for the coachee. You know, they're not there to fulfill your agenda. So you say first session, second session, third session, fourth session, fifth session. I cannot structure that for you. I can only say, okay, the first session is a discovery session. That's what I do, is where we discover and we explore and we try and see what are the goals we want to set. And we do some debriefs and things like that. And in fact, I call that a zero session because it's not really a coaching session. And we set goals for ourselves. And then the coaching actually begins. But if you try and structure that today we are going to focus on yourself and your problems, and then say tomorrow we are going to focus on your boss, and then after that we are going to focus on your family relationship. No, it doesn't work because it's your agenda, not theirs. So stop trying to put your agenda onto the coaching sessions. You cannot put your own agenda there. If your agenda is going to rule, then it's not called coaching. Then it's one-to-one training session.
Thank you, ma'am, for this reply. Dhananjay sir, I hope this is clear.
Ms. Anita, if you can highlight exactly what process as a coach one can follow, that I wanted to understand. So
process
as a coach, like and any model is there, or any process that a coach normally follows?
There are many models. There's the, you know, the Franklin Templeton models. There's the Marshall Goldsmith model, which is stakeholder-centered coaching. There is the Erickson model, where I've learned, which is the solution-focused coaching. There is a GROW model. You know, there is NLP-based coaching. There is neuroscience-based, brain-based coaching, neuro-linguistic programming. There's so many models. So that's why it's important to do your research and see what works for you.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
But if you create a model saying that session 1 and then session 2 and session 3, like you asked in your question, then that is not an agenda to be set.
Okay, understood. Thanks.
Thank you.
So we can take Sanjay now. Sanjay has also been there.
Hi Sanjay. Hi Sanjay. Long time no see.
Hi Anita. How are you, dear? Good to see you. You have slimmed down, huh?
Yeah, 18 kilos.
Great. So I've been a ICF ACC and now preparing for PCC. I just want to know, in terms of breakthrough, how to tap the subconscious of a coachee.
Actually, when you do the PCC level coaching, you move beyond, ACC, you get caught more with the do's and don'ts and, action steps and, achievement of goals. It's a lot more performance-based kind of coaching. But when you get to PCC level, you move up the, neurological levels and you get to the person's, being and the level of being. And that's when, that's where you work with at that level, the self-concept of the person. Who am I and what is my journey and where am I going? Those kind of issues you work with. So that, so I don't know. So that's when you get to the PCC level, and when you do your PCC transcripts, they're very different from your ACC transcripts. I hope that answers.
Yeah, that is the root part.
You just move up the neurological level. That's a shortcut answer.
Thank you.
Anita ma'am, there are a few questions people have put in the chat. So I would just be taking up. People, if your questions have been answered, I would request you to, put your hands down. Neha Karya says, what are the organizations in Mumbai who are engaged into coaching? Are there many of you?
There are many. There are many. And lots. And there is not just organizational coaching, but there are a lot of executives and non-executives who come to you as individual clients also for coaching. So there are many. I don't know. I don't have statistics on this. If you contact the ICF Mumbai chapter, you might get some statistics from there. Yeah.
Okay, next question is very interesting. Ma'am, Benita Parekh asks, is it illegal to call oneself a coach if you have not got a certificate from one of the institutions you mentioned?
It's not illegal, but can you sleep with it is the question. It's not illegal to call yourself a coach.
All right.
Can call themselves, but can you sleep with it? Yeah, are you being true to yourself? Does your conscience allow you? That's the question.
So Urvashi Kaul has few questions. She had emailed it also, and I think so she's put it in the chat too. Her first question is challenges faced when the transitions happens from a trainer to coach.
Okay, the big challenge is that you keep going back. It's like 2 steps forwards and 1 step back, 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And there's always a lot of questioning. The biggest challenge is, did I put my agenda onto the coachee in any way? Did I tell the coachee in any way what? Did I advise the coachee? Did I make my own set of recommendations to the coachee? So that's the biggest challenge. And then as a coach, you need to reflect on every step of the way after every coaching session. Just reflect and see how did it go. And if you were okay, and if there were any course corrections you want to make and move on. So that's the biggest challenge that you face. But once you've traversed that path, then the transition is complete. Then it's very difficult to go back in that. So it becomes kind of hardwired in your own brain, the coach presence and the coach position.
So she has another question where she's asking how welcoming would be a trainer's credentials vis-a-vis that there are many stakeholders in the industry and at very senior positions becoming a coach.
That is true. The market is getting very crowded, but I believe that the pie is big enough for everybody. I believe everybody can, there's a place for everybody. It's difficult. Your first assignment is difficult. I know a lot of people are troubled with not being able to find enough work to do. But I would say you got to do a lot of pro bono coaching to get your coaching feet also and understand whether you're in the right direction. So possibly, the first 100, 200 hours of coaching you have to do free and pro bono and with friends and with colleagues and with other coaches. In ICF, they do coaching triads where 3 people, they coach each other and, you get a bit of an idea as to how to practice your skills, before you actually go in the market. So, yeah, so there is a lot of demand and there's actually a lot of need for coaching. Not so much demand, there's a lot of need. And there are too many coaches around. So, but I believe that it's big enough for everybody.
So there's another question she asked. I think so. This is very intriguing because I think so. Everyone, whether he's a trainer or a coach, everyone wants to know what is their personal niche. So how to build your personal niche, like networking, free coaching, a website, peripherals, and all.
So I would say don't be too hasty to freeze on your niche. A niche is good because then the word of mouth gets around, and you can anytime anyone has a need for coaching, say women in board positions, they'll come to you, or they've got a coaching for so and so, they will come to you, because that niche is what creates your brand, your personal brand, as separate from all the others. But a niche is also like a blue ocean, but nobody goes there if if the market is is not there, then there's nobody there in that. So don't make yourself too exclusive a niche either. So initially, the first couple of years, I would say coach anybody and everybody wherever you get an opportunity. And eventually in your own world, it will become apparent to you what your niche is, what your area is, because it's something, it has to be a part of your purpose and your own ikigai, I will say. What is your ikigai? What is your purpose? What is some triggering events in your life that triggered you to, create a niche for such coaching? For example, I had complete health reversal and, diabetes reversal and health reversal 2 years ago. And now I'm training to be a health coach and a nutrition coach as well. I want to make that my niche now. And the niche is never fixed. 2-3 years later, it could change. And 4-5 years later, it could change. So the niche has to be something that's personally anchored in your own experience. Some transformational experience that you yourself had, something that you went through. And so that's where a niche, comes from, your own ikigai. So don't be in too much of a hurry to over specialize yourself in a particular niche unless you have special expertise. So if you're a fitness freak and you want to coach people on fitness, then that's fine. Or you're a financial wealth expert, you want to coach people on financial health management and stuff like, then it's fine. But if you're not overly specialized, then don't try to over crystallize your, till you reach a point, your own journey, where you're sure that this is where my niche lies, this is where my ikigai is, and that's when you precipitate that niche.
That was really beautiful, ma'am. The way you put it, that it has to undergo your personal transformation, and that's when you can apply. You can experience yourself, and then only you can work on that niche. Ma'am, Kevin Diaz has one question. How can we demonstrate achievement to tangible outcomes as a coach at the end of the sessions?
No, say that again. As a coach at the end, how can we demonstrate?
Yes, ma'am.
There are, organizational compulsions that ask you to, measure the ROI in coaching, the return on investment, just like ROI on training. Now there's ROI on coaching. So you can measure like Kirkpatrick on 5 different levels, and the 5th level never happens. So you can get immediate feedback, reaction level, and then you can get demonstrated results. If it's a performance-based coaching, then you can get just yesterday, I closed one coaching session for a particular client, and and she said, I want my boss to join in, and the boss is already saying, hey, I noticed you saying this, I noticed you're doing this, which you never did so far. So the impact, the perception of others, that level also gives you some. And then business impact, sometimes you can measure, sometimes you can't measure. It's the same as training. So results are there, measurable demonstration of developing your indices accordingly.
Ma'am Bindu Nair, I think so. She has a question wherein Sanjay asked that question of ACC, of being. So she's asking, how do you define a being of a person?
How do you define a being? We should ask Salman Khan. He has those T-shirts saying "Being Human." But jokes apart, my joking part comes from being a trainer, because you have to be an entertainer when you're a trainer, huh? So which you don't have to be when you're a coach. So being is that part of the person that brings them alive. their hopes, their aspirations, their dreams, their joys, their sorrows, their ambitions, their compatibility, their leadership qualities, their character, the way they deploy themselves. This is all being, something that comes from inside out. I don't know if there's a scientific definition. I'll have to research and come back if there is. But this is, to me, when I engage with the person, I engage with the being of a person and who they are and how do they, express themselves. There's a little bit of the academician in me says that there's an existential, phenomenological, and normative level of being. Okay, existential level of being is who I am and what is my journey and what's my purpose in life. And then the phenomenological level is how do I experience the world and, what meanings do I make of the world every time I encounter, different parts of the world. And the normative level is what do I say to whom and what kind of relationships I form with whom. So there are these three levels of being also, but those are all theoretical constructs. Yeah.
I think the Sunita Chalki has raised her hand for since long. So Sunita, please ask.
Hi, Anita, ma'am.
Hi again. Hi once more. Good to see you again, Sunita.
Yeah. So, ma'am, I had a question. So, during some of the coaching sessions, I have noticed that a lot of times, your coachee tends to digress from the topic, and you're kind of, while you may have thought, I will have numbered session or a bounded, a time bound session, but sometimes you're not able to stick to it. And so, how do you or how have you managed to ensure that you bring the coachee back and are still able to get the outcome that maybe the organization is expecting you to get?
That's a huge challenge. That's a huge challenge. And I don't have any one technique I can tell you. All I can say is that is the only point when you would like to interrupt and say, hey, listen, this was the question and can we stay with the question? And, that's the way I try to do it at times. But then depending on time, okay, you can overflow your time commitment by 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And in the interest of time, you just keep waiting and seeing, maybe there will be something that will fructify. But yeah, so there's no answer. It's very frustrating. 3 days ago, I had one session and I finished. I was like a zombie for 10 minutes after that session because the person just wasn't coming to the point. Yeah. But yes, it is a big challenge when the coachee, I just say that, if it's best if the coachee does not get nominated, but he volunteers. Okay. Because when he volunteers, then he knows he has to extract value from the session. And if he's paying from his pocket, then he has to extract that value from that session. Okay. Right. If he gets nominated by the organization, then he will be all over the place. And if you try and look at the pattern of his thinking, maybe that might give you a clue as to what is there that might anchor him, that might bring him back.
Okay.
But again, it's a touch and go situation because you might bring him back and again he flies off. So, and time gets lost. So, and you got
okay. All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Sanjay, your hand is raised. Do you still have any question?
No. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Aditya Mona has one question. Should a coach build a personal or corporate brand?
Well, that's a matter of personal preference, I would say. Ultimately, the organization hires the coach, not the company. That's my take on it. At least that's my experience. Hiring a company, not a coach. So the company, like my company is called Open Spaces Consulting, but the company is hiring Anita Madhok. And therefore my brand must speak louder than my company's brand. So very rarely the company will come and say, okay, I want to hire Open Spaces Consulting. Doesn't matter who the coach is. You can send anybody from this company and all coaches are the same. I find that doesn't work, the corporate thing. My experience in my spheres at least. So the personal brand speaks much louder for a coach than a corporate brand.
Ma'am, the questions are not there, but there are a lot of appreciation messages. Just like Binita Parekh has said, thanks a lot, awesome interaction. Then we have Meeta Dixit says, thanks, very enlightening session. Urvashi Kaul has also mentioned, thank you so much, Dr. Neeta ma'am and Mr. Anu for asking my queries. Love the Ikigai, my favorite. You just counseled me, Anita ma'am. So, yeah.
I've got one or two more slides to show.
Yes, ma'am. So I think so. There's a lot of appreciations here. So this is I'm asking anyone if anyone has any question can put it in the chat. Ma'am, would you like to go ahead with one case study? I think so that would help a lot of people.
There is one question from Vandana. Just check that out, please.
Vandana. Vandana, if you're there, you're most welcome to ask the question.
Or a statement. I think it's a statement.
No, I don't have question. I just corrected for PCC, it's 500 hours and not 800.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think
Not a question.
At one stage long ago, it used to be 800, but then they changed that.
Yeah, there's some changes happened at
So that's why I directed everyone to go to the ICF website to see the latest, because even some of the competencies and things have also changed recently.
Amar Kamath sir, I would request you if you're there, if you can ask the question, because there's a lot of chats happened and I think so might have missed it. Okay, yes, I got it. You would like to ask the question yourself?
Yes, Anita ma'am, good
Hi,
evening,
Amar.
first of all.
Good evening, Amar. Good to see you again.
Yeah, very nice. It is a Saturday feast to listen to you. I enjoyed, and I have one question. As I will be launching my own firm, which will be focused on soft skills training for pharma professionals, and I will be launching myself as a trainer in the coming 1 year. So, do I need to get qualified as a professional coach? This is my first part, and second is whether it is going to help me.
See, I do believe one of the ways we can work is that there's a training, is particularly it's a skills training, and everybody goes away from the training saying that these are my 3 action takeaways and this is my action plan for implementing the learning from here. I do believe that 15 days later, 1 month later, and perhaps 2 months later, 2 or 3 good coaching sessions will actually see that action plan coming out from that training, actually seeing it translated into action. So if there can be some performance coaching around that supplements the training that you're doing, it will be a good idea. So if I train about 20 people, then each one of them need to follow through with their action plans, and that coaching can help in that individual takeaways from the training. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a good idea to do it. But I don't know anyone who's doing it I just know 1 or 2 places where it's being done, but not very often.
Shall I put it this way, since I will be planning to focus on leadership training in the later part after 2 years, possibly by the time I get ready with this coaching skills, because leaders usually like to get coached rather than trained. So as they have feeling that they know everything. So probably there these credentials will help me to some extent.
Yeah, I think they will. I think it's a good thing to be a coach, even if you don't do coaching, it's still a good place to be, in a coach position where, you can sit back and watch the world go by. But yeah, like I said, it can, coaching can actually supplement training takeaways and see the training takeaways actually in action. So if it's leadership, leadership is something you can provide the initial training, but then it's an individual journey. For every individual leader. So that particular leader, that journey can be enhanced. The results can be enhanced through coaching. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Ma'am, Jaideep Singhari has raised his hand. Jaideep, would you like to ask the question?
Yeah. So, ma'am, like I'm a student of ma'am only in PG diploma. So I am taking this opportunity because nice discussion going on. So I am basically a IT professional with 15 years of experience as a technical person, and I am in transition to become a trainer. So, but my planning, so to say, was to move within my organization as a corporate trainer and then take it from there on, because I exactly don't have any experience, though I used to do webinars. I love public speaking, particularly in last 1.5 years I've given. And so my question is, ma'am, on those lines, So what is the best approach? A person like me with 15 years of technical experience. So my journey in this field, if you can briefly guide.
Well, I will, as a coach, not like to tell you, but I would like you to explore for yourself and find some answers. And if you want, we can ask you some coaching questions around that at an appropriate time. Right now is not the time.
Yeah, definitely. I got it, ma'am.
Yes, yes, there is a lot you can do, but I cannot do it for you. You have to figure it out for yourself, and we can help you figure that out. We can support you in that journey.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Got it.
Aviral Kothari has raised the hand. Aviral, you can unmute yourself? Yeah.
Yes, Ranu ma'am, thank you. Anita ma'am, I just have a very quick question, and as a Marwari, this is very important for me. How much investment I am looking to become a PCC? So I'm not asking you exactly, but mota mota kitna kharcha ho jata hai?
That's quite a bang-on question.
To be very honest with you.
I'll just share my PPT, and we will. This is a little bit of a survey I had floated around before today's session. I had sent out to 4 or 5 different trainers, and I said, what questions you may have, So I think I've addressed some of these questions. What is the difference between training and coaching? I have addressed. Why coaching isn't training? This question I didn't address. Why is the process of becoming a coach so long and expensive while becoming a trainer is so easy and simple? No, you can easily simply become a coach as well. Start making a visiting card saying I'm a coach, and then, go and sell your services. Organizations are now realizing that they want certified people, because for them it's an assurance of certain standards, certain qualities, certain process. So that's why. And why is it so expensive? It's now that the trainings, there is a cost factor. I think the cheapest would be about 1 lakh for 60 hours of training, which requires you to, which is required for an ACC certification. Because for a PCC, you need 120 hours, which will be another 1 lakh perhaps. And that's the cheaper ones. They're more expensive ones as well. So yeah, and why is it so long? Because it takes that much time for you to mature and find your coaching legs and to prove yourself. 100 hours at least, and 500 hours at least. So that's mota is just maybe you can keep aside a lakh and a half for the coach training for 60 hours to start with, and then that will get you to an ACC. Then about $140 is the annual membership fee of the ICF. You have to pay that, and that translates into a certain number of rupees. And what other expenses are there? And then when you do get a certification, there's about $200 charge for the certification process, because there's somebody scrutinizing all that documentation and the stuff that you submit. So those are, I think, mota expenses.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, I'm also.
There is my case studies, which I put 2 case studies, which are actually organizations I did coaching with. And one was a transnational company, which was owned by a New York-based PE fund in a B2B business. It was a chemicals kind of a business. And someone at the headquarters, actually they didn't have any one headquarters. It was like, it's a transnational company. Different sections are headquartered different places. But someone sitting in London who was in charge of this had conducted a 360-degree feedback exercise for the C-suite team, which is your CXO, the chief marketing officer, the chief finance officer, the chief HR officer, and all the chief guys, the chief technical officers. And their need was for a coach to debrief on the feedback reports and to continue coaching on the learning goals derived from there. So they called me in and said, this is our need, and will you be able to deliver? So that's what we did. They chose us amongst their different partners, and we enabled the achievement of individual learning goals arising out of that 360-degree feedback. So we began with administering a battery of tests, which personality assessments. Okay, I don't want to use the word tests. Personality assessments to uncover unique personality and leadership styles. So each one's uniqueness was looked at. And we designed a coaching intervention over 6 sessions with each coaching session having some agenda and objectives. And the rollout was being undertaken, and individual coaches are being coached to meet the learning goals emerging from there. During the coach, some needs of working with the group dynamics emerged. For example, there was a sales guy, who went out there, grabbed a lot of orders and said, I booked the order and we have to deliver in 3 weeks time. But the technical guy said, no, this particular the product cannot be delivered in 3 weeks time. So there's a lot of gaps and communication gaps and personality gaps between the technical guy and the sales guy. And this is not the only organization that it happens in many companies. So we went for an offsite for a Team Tarang intervention to help the team gel better. And we came back with the team charter for change. And then we're going back to review those team charters. So that's one case study. I'm still employed with we finished the main coaching intervention, but we're still going there to do some leftover works. This is a multinational company, not transnational, headquartered in Germany, offered engineering services and solutions in 2 major infrastructure sectors. Today also this company is very much in the news. So there were 2 major infrastructure sectors where they offered their engineering services. And we were invited to undertake coaching of the entire C-suite team consisting of 13 CXO and direct reports, who are direct reports of the CEO. Being a very old-fashioned hierarchical organization driven by very, very traditional, logical German values to a more open culture, that was the objective, where there would be a lot more collaboration across the organizational silos that get created. So again, we did a battery of personality profiling assessments, coaching debriefs, and setting individual goals, mid-course career, and the organization culture evolved in line with the intended direction. So people started collaborating, and not only at the CXO level, but down the line also there was a lot more collaboration, a lot more openness. And the CEO of this company, who was an American guy, he was very happy with the outcomes of this work that we did. So this is just a tool that I use. So this is 2 case studies that we did. And now we are closing on time at 7:30. So I'm going to now hand over back to ISTD, Mr. Panikkar. Thank you for the opportunity here to talk to to a lot of people here. And I'm really thankful and grateful for everything that you do.
Thank you, Anita. It was a wonderful session. I hope everybody enjoyed it. And we hope to see all of you again, other programs that we will be organizing in the coming days. Once again, I know Saturday evening, 1.5 hours.
Sir, may I announce the 1st May program?
Yeah, please.
Yes, we are having a NLP introductory session by R. Karthik. He has been in this field of work for almost more than 10 years. So people watch out this week and do join in next Saturday, same time, 6 to 7:30 p.m. Thank you everyone for joining in for this lovely session.
Thank you. Good night. Stay safe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.